Okay, hi everybody. First of all, can you hear me well? And yes, I am Luna. I'm back to see, you know, green Luna again. All right. Please tell me if you can hear me well, normal. So, okay. All right, you can hear me. That's great. That's great. Hi everybody. I am Luna. Welcome back to my Mooncast. Um, Today I'm going to talk about fascism in Asia because we've been trying to talk to educate people about fascism lately, and when we talk about fascism we mostly just talk about Europe or in the USA and in America. I mean, it's very Eurocentric, very white centric, and today I want to talk about fascism in Asia because we also have a fascism problem here in Asia, and it's really bad, and I want to educate us more about this issue and what's the difference, what the similarity and what the difference between a Western fascism and an Asian fascism, and why we have it this way. And if you have any question about this topic, feel free to ask and I will try to answer them all right all right, well, give me a second. All right. Talking about how Europe is actually just, I mean, that is why I call Europe, the West Asia. Europe is a myth. In fact, it doesn't exist, and it's just West Asia. It's really BS that people, keep like, oh, calling it like Europe, the rest of East Asia. Like, no, it's just West Asia. Excuse me, the same continent anyway. So, yes, Europe doesn't exist. It's all Asia the whole time. It's just Asia. I didn't know about this, Philip. I did not know about this. I need to read more about it. I have no clue. I was into mangas, but then not in the last like 15 years. All right, Gio, thank you so much for the super chat. Can't watch tonight, but have a good stream and see y'all next week. Oh, really? Okay, hope you have a good time. And yes, we will be here. I will be here this next week. So thank you so much for your support. How am I today? I'm good. I'm good. I just had breakfast, which is my awesome hometown cuisine. Bánh cuốn, we call like the roll kind of cake made from rice powder, and then they say steam it. And they put like the fillings, and then they put like caramelized onion on it. It's really freaking good. And sadly, I cannot make it because it's a very delicate kind of cuisine, and you need a lot of experience and talent to make it. It's not something that you can just make it from scratch. It requires a lot of amount of effort and talent to do it. So I cannot do it. I hope that one day, soon enough, I will learn how to do it. So it's this. Let's go to the food today. Let's go show me bánh cuốn tôm. So my hometown's cuisine. I'm from. Oh, you know what? Do you have the same problem with me? I cannot use anything related to like Google search at all. Using both my phone and my computer. I mean, even my mom's phone doesn't work. It's very strange. Cannot use Google search at all. I have to use Bing. Can you believe that? Stupid. All right, I show you this picture. Oh my gosh, get ready to be very hungry. And this is my warm up section. before we get to the main topic today, but let's check out Bing and what does Bing have. When I type my hometown's cuisine, it's bánh cuốn tôm. It's really good. It's made from. It's different in some other cuisine. Is that first of all, the filling we usually use shrimp, stir fry shrimp, and it's big like this. And we eat it with just dipping sauce or the meatball like this, the barbecue meatball with fish sauce. Oh, it's so freaking good, people. It's really good. Even like, I really suggest you, if you're not from my hometown, if you go to my hometown, you have to try my hometown's cuisine. It's something similar, but also something different. We have some touch in it, so it's different. So it's really good and it's healthy because there's no oil, virtually no oil in this. With the cake itself is same. The only oil is that, like, when they stir fry, they caramelize the onion. There's an oil in it, but mostly that's it. Dry ramen, you want bánh cuốn, right? Yeah, bánh cuốn is delicious. It's called bánh cuốn in Vietnamese. Bánh bèo Hải Phòng. Of course I try bánh bèo Hải Phòng. It's so good. It's really good. So here's the thing too. To be honest, people. Hey, Kentucky. Hi. Thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you so much. Solidarity from Kentucky. Yes, solidarity from Thanh Hóa, Vietnam. Um, when we talk about Vietnamese food, mostly you talk about phở or bánh mì, right? I mean, I have to say that bánh cuốn and phở, bánh mì and phở is good. Bánh mì is very good, like this one. It is delicious, and phở also good. But this is just like teeny tiny part of actual Vietnamese cuisine that you would be surprised about how good my whole cuisine is. Phở, this is phở, right? Phở, it's like a rice beef noodle, famous in the whole world. So, but this is like teeny tiny bit. It's like nothing. This is nothing. If think about, learn about how much bigger Vietnamese cuisine is, and you will be surprised. You will be surprised one day you set your food in Vietnam, you try our food here. It's so affordable. Oh, so much affordable. Usually, if you eat like street food or like normal Vietnamese food, a meal enough for you is just like $1 to $2, maybe $3 the most. If you eat like big fancy restaurant, even a bowl of pho is $2 here. A bowl of all kind of noodles is $2 here, and the bánh cuốn is just like $1.50. So yep. Okay, let's help our comrade Infinity about this thing. They wanna write a speech about who created this word. It's like a religious speech program. Huh. I want to say, oh, the peasant and workers made this word, but I can't think how to start. Oops. Isn't that very not idealist of you? That you believe that it's the workers and the peasant who made this word? Um, you can start from, a Ho Chi Minh saying. I'm just saying, but if I were you, I would do that. Ho Chi Minh has a poem about the strength of the youth. Is for the youth union of Vietnam, the Communist Youth Union. And in Vietnamese, it means không có việc gì khó, chỉ sợ lòng không bền, đào núi và lấp biển, quyết chí ắt làm nên. It means in English, like, there's nothing difficult in this world. Đào núi và lấp biển. If you dig the mountain and you fill up the ocean, all we should be scared is our waving heart. If you are determined in doing what you're doing, you will succeed in doing that. This is the point of it. You can start about that. Let's see. Or you can talk about how labor shape our consciousness, shape our hand. You know, the hammer shape the hand, and the hand although shape the hammer. I mean, I try my best. I don't know. I'm not good at writing essay anyway. Okay, if it specifically has to be religious, so say God made the workers and the worker made the world. I like that. I mean, if it's has to be religious, I agree with Andrew here. I mean, to the point that workers made this world and the farmer made this world. Is fun part in the thumbnail? Yes, it is. All right, are we? Are you warm enough yet? Are you warm enough to get to the main topic today? Oh, three infinity. I hope that I did have you somehow. I think that I didn't, but anyway, yeah, you can start us on. Usually, the easiest way as a student specialize in literature for from middle school to high school, the easiest way to start a speech is start from a quote or a poem or a line of a song that you like. That's the easiest way, the fastest way. Just say like the tip for literature specialized student is like, because some have very difficult topic and don't know how to start it. Just pick up a quote that you like and then quote and start from that quote. All right, that's the fastest and the easiest. Okay, iced. You're warm enough, huh? I'm not sure about that. Your name is iced, but okay, let's jump right in, as Dorian said. All right. Speaking of Asian fascism, one of my first martial art teachers was an ex-ARV, and ooh, I didn't realize at the time, but he was a fascist. Ha! Here we go. Now let's talk about Asian fascism. All right, how to start? All right, let's start from maybe the one of the oldest fascists in Vietnam, a little bit in Asia that we like famously know about. Not exactly the oldest, I might be wrong, but like the first famous. Give me a second. No, I don't want this. No. All right, give me a second, folks. I need to open my stream elements. All right, Asian fascism. The first that we need, I think that we need to be educated about, and I want to make a video about, is Japanese fascism. Right. The biggest problem that I see with the West is that usually in the West they don't paint the Japan, the empire of Japan fascists. They don't call them fascists. They call them militarist. Right. It's just like a country that emphasize too much on military, and they use military to conquer Asia or something. But in fact, they are fascists. There's no doubt about it. They have a fascist party. They call it like you know the fascist party or something of the empire of Japan or something like that. It's and now let's talk about why did Japan become fascist? A very good question that usually people. Give me a second, people. It's our delivery guy. And I'm calling EJ to go take them. All right. So yes, Imperial Japan was fascist, and why did they become fascist? Now let me give you some of the um, you know Japan. Talk about that, showing them pictures in like 19th and 18th centuries. So Japan in around 1000, about 1800, their society, this their society was controlled by samurai. Okay, so here's a very brief history of Japan in the 10th century. So from 11th to 12th century, Japan, they were controlled by the samurai, what they call class, okay, class, and all the way until 1800, the samurai just got stronger and stronger in Japan, and that was why like the king, the emperor of Japan before 1800, he just had the illusion of power. He didn't have a real power, or the real power fall into the hand of the lords and the samurai class. The samurai class is a knight, like the knight in England, the knights that serve the kings and the lords. So at that time the lords were occupied. Thank you so much, Chris. If you miss your message, you can just type here and I will try to read it. Thank you so much for your donation. Okay. Oh, shoot. My own take on the definition of fascism. I should have a talk about this earlier. Okay, now there are many definitions of fascism out there. Give me a second, people. Sorry, people. Just ordered a pizza. So EJ took that package, and since he's a foreigner, so that delivery guy didn't trust EJ, didn't give it to EJ. I just called the delivery guy to say, yeah, hey, that's my husband. Please give those orders to him. All right, the definition of fascism. There are many definitions of fascism, but my most favorite one, and I think the one that cover the core issue of fascism, is the Michael Parenti's definition of fascism. There are three main points in Michael Parenti's definition of fascism. First of all, it is a pseudo-revolutionary. It means that fascists, they use the pseudo-revolutionary call to fool the nation and fool the people. It sounds like a revolution, but actually it's not. They don't want to change anything. They just want to maintain the status quo of the society. Pseudo-revolutionary. The second point is that fascism, they serve the capitalist class, a very rational support for the capitalist class. So like, even though they appear to you as a revolutionary kind of call, but actually they still serve the ruling class. They serve the capitalist class. They serve the ruling class. And the third is that it, um, irrational call to appear to the workers. Okay, so here's the thing: it's a pseudo revolutionary call. It's rationally serve the capitalist class, but it has an irrational appear to the working class. Means that it's an opportunist kind of ideology, and it just used the working class, the peasants, the workers, as a tool for its path to power. So it's gonna use whatever kind of makes sense at that time to call for support from the working class. Irrational appear to the working class, but it has very rational support to the capitalist class, and is a pseudo-revolutionary. All right, got it? So now let's talk about Japan and what kind of what part that match that definition of fascism by Michael Parenti. Back to the main point here, Japan. Japan in from like about for about like 700 or 800 years, the samurai and the lords control the power of the society, and it caused a lot of tension between the samurai, the lord class, and the peasant class. And the big problem is that like the last samurai, the last strongest samurai time in Japan was the Edo time. All right, at that time there was a lord with a bunch of his samurai that was in the Edo province of Japan, and they were very powerful for a long time. So we call it like the Edo time. And the king at that time very weak, and the lord actually hold all the power. But the big one of the very is interesting problem in Japan at that time was that the samurai under the Edo time, they got poorer and poorer. Now, how funny is that? They got poorer and poorer because the problem, the biggest problem is like the lord, they charged, they took the taxes from the people, right? But the tax, they didn't change the tax over time. So like after a long time, the tax remained the same, but actually everything got, the inflation, everything got bigger and more expensive. So the samurais got poorer and poorer and poorer, and they couldn't change the system, the very old like conservative samurai system, and they had a bunch of ideology about how they should be respected, they should be well respected by the whole society, they should be rich, this and that, but actually in fact they are getting poorer and poorer. So it caused a crisis in that society in the Edo time. So about 1860, around that time, 1858 or 1860, there was a king in Japan. His name was Meiji. We call it like the Meiji king, the Mingchi in Vietnamese. They call it Mingchi, but his name in Chinese is Meiji king. He wanted to take back the power. He wanted to take all the power away from the samurai and the lord class to give it to back those power back to the royal family of Japan, of the emperor of Japan, right? So he did try to do that, and the way he did that was that he wanted to transform Japan following European model, and they wanted to sway Japan away from Eastern their traditional culture. So we call it like Mingchi Zi Tan. Is that like the what do you call it, the reform? Actually, is that reform? Yeah, it's like Meiji reform kind of policy of the king of Japan at that time. And all right, and Japan at that time, they wanted to eliminate all the Japanese culture because they believe that it is the Japanese culture and tradition that brought them to this, situation where everything is f up and everything is so poor and backward compared to, European countries, which was like French or the UK, and like Germany too. So they want to go to the West and follow the way to the West, even though, yes, they still want to maintain as the emperor of Japan, but they want to westernize their country and bring industrialization into Japan. That was how it started, and the samurai culture become like less and less influence, and the Meiji king had actual power back then. And the way of they doing that, around 1900, they started industrialize the country and bring a bunch of factories using like the European style into the country, and it did help the economy of the country, but then it did help a lot, and it created like a new class of people, which is the workers. All right, and but after a few years, the biggest problem that Japan had at that time was that they did not have natural resources for the industrialization. Keep in mind that that's a very important point. Because Japan industrialized their country because they wanted to follow the European style industrialization, And then they did that, but then they realized that they need natural resources to feed the industry. That was why around World War I, they started conquering other countries. The point was to have a materials like raw material to serve the capitalist class, like newly born capitalist class in Japan. And of course, that those capitalist people, those capitalist class, they, you know, they feed the king too. The king took money from the capitalist class. So again, here's it's it matched one point in parentheses fascism. The definition of fascism is that it served the working class. Okay, so around the World War One, 1914, 1918, they started attacking Korea. They started attacking, the part like the Manchu part of China to the next to Japan and Korea, and then they moved further down south, and then they conquer Taiwan, and then they conquer, Nanjing, and then they went further south in the World War II. They went further to Southeast Asia, and they conquered most of the Indochina and then Indonesia and Philippines too. So the point was that is that they wanted to have raw material for the industry. All right, around around that same, the First World War, they kind of wanted to, because they kept winning. Because actually at that time they did have a really good navy. The Japan, they had really good navy and strong and powerful. You know that they have they are an island nation, and they have strong, pirates and also navy, because they really good. So like they using the navy is very powerful at that time. They won. They kept winning and winning during the First World War like that. So at that time those those like those conquerors, those successful conquerors, brought them an illusion that they are superpower, and they could be more. They wanted to be more richer and richer. Around the same time that about the 1920s, Benito Mussolini took power in Italy and became like, the I have to say that the first fascist government in Europe, in Italy. They wanted to be the same. Japan, they wanted to, the empire of Japan, they want to follow the same path, and they want to be richer and richer and richer. And fascism suddenly became a very useful ideology for them to use to conquer, to have an excuse to go and conquer the rest of Asia. Hey, El Guapo. Hello, Na. Love your video. Thank you for teaching me about struggle and history of comrades in Vietnam. Oh, thank you so much for the super chat. Hey, thank you. Yes, the Japanese Navy destroyed Russian Navy in 1905, devastating to the Tsar. Exactly. They keep winning and winning. They won. And I think they did the very first big like battle between, an Asian and somehow European kind of navy, and Asian navy won. It's very the best book understanding fascism is Black Shirt and Red. Yes, I cannot recommend this book enough for you. Go read this. All right. So around 19 First World War, they kept winning and winning and winning, and they joined the alliance kind of Entente, and they joined the Entente kind of side. It means alliance in the First World War. I could be wrong, but I just remember the Vietnamese name for it, so I'm not an expert in English names. And then they fought against Germany and French and something like that too, and they won. They got a lot of wealth from that. And then about 1920s, when fascism first arose in Italy under Mussolini, they kind of, oh yes, Japan brought this ideology back to Japan. Like, oh, we can do this because it's good for our system. So they became one of the first fascists in Asia from right after World War One, right from the 1920s, And then slowly, and then the king at that time, the king, the actual king that brought fascism and agreed with fascism in Japan was a Hirohito. Let me show you Hirohito. At first, he was just a prince, and then he took power, and he worked with a bunch of other fascists in Japan. That is the guy Hirohito. He's the guy that worked with fascists, and usually people do not call him fascist, but I call him fascist because, like, yes, he was the one who literally, spread fascism all over Japan. And after that is this is the emperor of Japan at that time, and this is the actual, the butcher of Japanese fascist Tojo. This guy, he's the actual fascist, the prime minister of the empire of Japan, right? After the World War II, he was brought into international court and he was charged for crimes against humanity. He tried to kill himself by a shot in his chest, but actually it did not kill him, and he survived. And then just a few weeks after that, he was hanged to death. This guy is literally the face of fascism in Japan. Yes, zero gonna. Hirohito was a fusion of historical Japanese problems and managed to fuse politics and religion there with him. All right, it is very complicated. Let me break it down because I am also trying to learn this. Let's learn this together. All right, Hirohito. At that time, they have the same as with Hitler. Where the one leader, one nation, one party, or something like that. The same thing here. He wanted to become, the supreme, leader of Japan. He wanted people to worship him as his image and the nation's image merged into one. And that was like he became like he wanted to become a supreme leader of the empire of Japan. And they wanted to bring back, they call it like the Japanese spirit, Japanese religion, Japanese spirit, and Japanese tradition in worshiping the king. All right, like Pharaoh. He was like the Pharaoh of Japan. All right. Under fascism all the way into, World War II. Here's the thing. Even though in World War One they fought against Germany, but right around 1920s and 1930s, when fascism was very strong and powerful in Japan, they joined the Axis alongside with fascist Italy and Nazis Germany in the 30s and until the 40s, and they had a treaty. All three of them had a treaty together that like the three countries, and they've both trying to fight against America, the USA at that time. So they had an agreement. They had an agreement that whatever country that the USA attack, either like Italy or Germany or Japan, the other two will go and help. They had a treaty like that. And the reason why Japan joined the Axis, there were many fucking reasons. Most of them they wanted to, because they want to be powerful, and they think that they could gain powerful, and they think that the fascism will win all over the world. They want to conquer the whole entire Asia. All right. But then another small faction that bring them to the Axis are like they hated the USA. Okay, they really hated the USA at that time. They believed that the USA was their biggest enemy. Yeah. So like, and also like fascism, and they think that like with joining together they can like because like it doesn't mean that I support the USA or it's like a good force in the world. It just means that they see USA as a threat because the USA was becoming richer and richer, and they meanwhile those fascists, they want to maintain as superpower in the world. So that's why they join it. And yeah, so yeah, the official since the church defined the emperor. Yeah, I mean, the anti-Comintern Pact. Yep, exactly, to the anti-Comintern Pact too. And then the anti-Comintern Pact, and also they want to fight against the alliance. All right, and now this is some of the very famous crimes against humanity that Japan did from 1920s to 1947. Um, there are a few, but I can mention like they comfort women, they kidnap and torture tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of women in Korea and turn them into sex slaves. I can't. It's so much painful that I can't talk explain to you much. But you can just go Google it by yourself to see how horrible it was, and not just Korean women. It was Korean, the Chinese people too. Chinese people, Vietnamese people, Filipino women too. It's like everywhere that they they conquer, they turn women into their tool like that. All right, and then the Nanjing massacre, where in just a matter of 6 weeks they killed hundreds of thousands of people in the Nanjing. Even though that they claim that they only kill soldiers of Chinese, but actually they kill civilian and children and women. The Nanjing massacre. In they also the same thing happened. Massacres happened in Philippines too, and in Vietnam from the matter of 7 months. It just 7 months from October 1944 until May 1955. They killed 10% of Vietnamese population. It was 2 million at that time. Vietnamese population was just 20 million. They killed over 2 million Vietnamese because they caused a famine in Vietnam at that time. They took everything they could, and 10% of our population died. It was a tragedy to Vietnamese people even to this day. And it's really messed up. And that is Japanese fascism. They were fascists. And there was a unit in the fascist Japan army at that time. It was the Unit 731. They, on the outside, they disguised as a group of researchers and scientists who wanted to have clean water, to clean water for people. But actually, they are all mad scientists and doctors, fascist scientists and doctors who experiment on the prisoner of war to make bioweapons. Okay. And a lot of prisoner of war, not just Chinese, but also even the European prisoner of wars that lost to them, they turned them into, lab rat. Unit 731. Yes. And but the fucked up thing is this. After in 1945, after the Empire of Japan lost and they surrender, many of doctors and scientists in that unit were saved. Only some of them were brought into the international court as a crime against humanity that they did. Many of them were assigned asylum in the USA in exchange that they gave the USA their secret documents about all the weapons and the bioweapons and then what they learned from their experiments. The same with scientists and doctors, fast scientists and doctors in Nazi Germany. Said the same thing. The USA, Operation Paperclip. They brought a bunch of scientists, the fascists, and then one of the very high-ranking member of the Nazi Germany even became one of the leader of NASA, right? Huh? Sorry, my mom just asked me something and I just answered her. Shinzo Abe's grandfather was a general in the Nanjing massacre. I'm not surprised. The US government loves a little bit of questionable science. All right. I mean, I think talk about bioweapons. Isn't that the USA? The history of the country started with a bioweapon, smallpox, right? Thanksgiving when they gave indigenous people blankets that's like infected with smallpox and that killed like most of the population of indigenous people in the USA. This is the country that started with bioweapon is now, giving asylum to fascist doctors and scientists who experiment about bioweapons. Well, what a surprise! All right, that was fascism in Japan. Now, what? Now about the ideology, it's kind of hard to find about the ideology, but what I learned is this: Japan at that time, they became fascist from first of all from the need of the king to maintain his power, and then they became fascist because the king need to serve had to serve the capitalist class, or the capitalist class who owned the factories in Japan needed raw material, so they went out and conquered the rest of Asia to gain raw material for their factories so they can feed the king. Totally like started from the pure, needs from the king, the royal family, and the capitalist class. What they very pseudo revolutionary in a sense that they they call for the support of the Japanese people, so they can fight against, the what do you call it? Like the all the horrible tradition of Japan. They call themselves even like they started with the like the renovation call. They need to renovate country, change the country, reform the country into a better shape, to fight against all sorts of enemies. We're like they believe that the enemies, Russian or Chinese people or Korean people or Southeast Asian people is like the biggest enemy threaten their superiority. So like the force like that they turn them into the superior race, and they believe that all the rest of it is just like inferior to them, and therefore they just like genocide the rest of the country. Irrational call for support from the workers, and yeah, I mean it very much fitted because like those Japanese then who then became soldiers in the Empire of Japan. They went to other country and they fought and they killed and they died for these fascists under the false belief that they are building the empire of Japan like bigger and bigger and bigger. So the life of the people would be better. That's a lie. That's a very like like very common lies coming from fascists over the world. They wanted the workers to support them. Like if you go and kill for us, your wife at home, the children at home, we have a better life as you are bringing wealth back to the people. Something like that. So, all right. Now let's move to the next is right after that in Vietnam in 1950s. Let's go with the timeline here. Vietnam also had what we call another fascist, even though he did not, because the Vietnamese communists fought against him so hard that he did not have a full capacity of becoming a full fascist in Vietnam. It was Ngô Đình Diệm. Ngô Đình Diệm in the 1940s, he worked for the king again. He already to the fucking royal family, man. So Ngô Đình Diệm was like the prime minister who worked for the king in Vietnam. Ngô Đình family is a very famous noble family in Vietnam who worked a high-ranking member under the king, under the Nguyen dynasty in the 30s and in the 20s. So in the 40s, when the king of Vietnam was ousted by the communists, he resigned. Okay, he resigned. And the prime minister, this guy, prime minister, he wanted to maintain his power. And because he worked for the king, his family used to work for the king, and the king was severely suppressed by the colonialist French government. So he hated the French. Keep that in mind. He hated the French because he believed that the French were the biggest threat to Vietnamese power, or something like that. And his family, literally because of the French, controlled the king, and then the communists fought against both the French and the king was resigned. And then this guy lost his power. So he hated the French a lot. In the 1950, in the time when Vietnam was busy fighting against building our own country, the newly dependent Vietnam, and we fought against, the colonialist French who came back to Vietnam one more time after they lost, so they want to go to colonize Vietnam once again. This guy went to the USA right in 1950. He went to the USA, and in the matter of 2 years from 1950 to 1952, he managed to meet with the US government through the help of the church, the Catholic Church in the USA. So his family is Catholic. All right, and he went to USA, and through the connection with the church, and finally he met with a bishop in the USA, and that bishop introduced him with the with the USA government in 1952. At that time, the US government had a bunch of plans for Vietnam, because they, at one hand, the US government, they were supporting colonialist French in colonizing Vietnam again. On the other hand, they were preparing, if just in case the French lost, because 1952 was like very much close to the loss of French. So like they're preparing for the loss of French by their plan was that as soon as the French lost, USA immediately jump in and put a puppet government in the south of Vietnam, because they wanted to do the same thing to Vietnam as what they did in Korea. North and South Korea, they wanted Vietnam to be exact same thing like that. It was like they were preparing a dictator that they would put into power as soon as French lost. And that dictator will become dictator of the south of Vietnam, as they wanted to turn Vietnam into South Korea, and the North Vietnam turned into North Korea. So this is how this guy took power. He's a Catholic. He's like supremacist, Catholic supremacist. It's not just normal Catholic. 1954, this guy took power, because 1954 we had a Dien victory and the French lost, and we kicked them out of Vietnam. The USA immediately jumped in, and with the Geneva Agreement, they separate Vietnam into North and South Vietnam using the 17 parallel. And this guy was put as the president of the South of Vietnam at that time, Ngô Đình Diệm. Without any election, there's no election whatsoever. There's no fucking election. All right, it's just like the U.S. government just pop him up as a dictator of the South of Vietnam. From the day one of the power, he hated communists. Of course, he's a puppet of the USA. The USA hated communists, so of course he hated communists too. And he considered communists to be his biggest threat. So from 1954 to 1959, he created, he made a set of law in Vietnam that he would drag the guillotine. Oh my gosh, I couldn't. Give me a Google. Bing is not good. I cannot use Google search. I hate it. He made a set of law in Vietnam where he literally dragged the guillotine over the south of Vietnam and executed, beheaded all the people that he suspected to be communists without any actual trial. Got it? Let me show you the actual guillotine. Um, that is a very fascistic of him. He calculated around at least around 20 to 26,000 people who were killed by this guillotine. Okay, let me show you this. That is the guillotine. That is the guillotine that, like, when Vietnam was under the colonization of French, they brought four. They brought four guillotines to Vietnam and beheaded Vietnamese people, like Vietnamese citizen. And when Diem took power in the south of Vietnam, he used one of the guillotine in this one, and he used that to behead any civilian that he suspected to be communist. Around up to 26,000 people were killed by this guillotine. And now this guillotine is still in the Museum of Vietnam to remind us of the atrocities made by this fascist dictator. This is it, the actual guillotine that left by the French. All right, and he did not stop in just that. From about 1959 to 1963, he wanted the whole country to follow Christianity, the Catholic to be exact. So he wanted to eliminate all other religion, including Buddhism, including Hinduism, including Islam too. All kind of other religion. Everybody had to follow Catholic Christianity, and it caused a huge protest in the south of Vietnam committed by Vietnamese citizens and Vietnamese Buddhists who asked for the, they protested. They protested and asked for equality of, Buddhism and Christianity. Here. In about 1960s, they oppressed Buddhist people and they forced Buddhists to stop waving the flag of, a Buddha like this, one of this. Stop waving the flag of Buddha, and they arrested those Buddhists and those monks, and they forced them to get out of, get rid of their religion, many things like that, and it caused a huge pushback by Vietnamese Buddhists. And one of the very famous images is this. Thích Quảng Đức, he is a monk in that time, and in order to raise the awareness of the world about what this fascist dictator been treating, freedom of religion in Vietnam, he burned himself to death in front of the U.S. embassy in the south of Vietnam at that time. And this, yes, it caused a huge scandal in the rest of the world, and they started learning about what's been going on in the south of Vietnam, because what they learned at that time was just like the south of Vietnam was a democratic kind of government where people love their love their president, and it just peace, and all they did was to fight against the evil communists in the north of Vietnam. But this incident opened the eyes of a lot of, especially Westerners, about what's been actually going on in the south of Vietnam, and why, Southerner Vietnamese Southerners like arose and hated him and fought against him so much. And yes, and then of course I was about saying the exact same thing too. Like, and then three strike in Western media said Vietnam doesn't have freedom of religion, when literally the regime that didn't have the freedom of religion was the puppet regime backed by the USA. Right? So, Christian fascism, like the KKK, exactly like that, like the KKK. And because of the thing was like this, because of Ngô Đình Diệm was popped up by the USA, and there was never actual election, even though here's the thing too, the very important story I want you to know about it. So in 1954, with the Geneva Agreement, the USA wanted, took this as an excuse, like, oh, this guy is a dictator only for a short period of time. It's only for 2 years, though. The first plan was that in the Geneva Agreement, the USA told the rest of the conference that, like, this guy, this new president, actually the dictator, would just be in power for 2 years from 1954 to 1956. But in 1956, there will be a national election for Vietnamese people in Vietnam, where Vietnamese people would vote for their own leader. That was why the Geneva the people in the Geneva Agreement agreed with the USA that, well, okay, that guy will be in power for the matter of like short time, for 2 years, until Vietnam had the first election. But in 1956, nothing happened. In 1956, there was no election, despite the promise by the USA. In fact, the USA faked an election that they had no evidence whatsoever that it did happen. They had a fake election that they reported to the USA and to the rest of the world. Oh, there was an election, and around 99% of people in the South of Vietnam vote for this dictator. But no, there was no election. There's no evidence of it. No, nobody's asked. And actually, in the document by the White House of the USA, you can go Google it. Document by the White House, is like, at that time, they said in the report, they said that if Vietnam truly had an election right now in 1956, at least 80% of Vietnamese people would vote for Ho Chi Minh. That is the document reported by a US staff working for the US government, report to them about the situation in 1956. That was why they did not dare to have an actual election in South Vietnam. That was why that guy kept being in power until 1963, where he was cooled by his own people. That is it. Now, about why this fascist guy was cooled. It is a very interesting story. Because he was very brutal to Buddhists in Vietnam, and brutal to this Vietnamese citizen, where he literally like dragged the guillotine and beheaded people without any trial. All right, he was very unpopular in the South Vietnam, and he did not serve the CIA's purpose anymore. The CIA wanted to put him into power so he can, lie to his people and like gain the support from the people. But this guy just like failed at it. This guy just was failed at the mission of gaining the love and support from the people, because he was so fascist. He just killed citizens, the people that he's supposed to protect. And under the secret agreement from the CIA, he was cooled by his own military members. Dương Văn Minh was the guy who cooled this guy. Let me show you the Dương Văn Minh guy. So on one day, right after the death of John F. Kennedy, 1963, in Vietnam and south of Vietnam, one day the Ngo Dinh Diem, the fascist dictator, was assassinated by this his military personnel. His name was Dương Văn Minh. And yeah, he died, and this guy took power, and nothing changed. They still the puppet of the USA, and the Vietnam War became worse and worse right after that. All right, now let's talk about more about the fascist dictator of Vietnam, Ngo Dinh Diem. This guy, he how to start it? Based on a lot of memoirs from the people who literally worked for him in the 50s and in the early 60s. This Ngo Dinh Diem, this fascist guy, he did not trust anybody. No, he did not trust anybody. He turned the whole, government, the puppet government of South Vietnam at that time into, his family ruled. He, literally like got his brothers and his cousins and the wife of his brother to become the high-ranking member, to work in the Congress, the National Congress, and to be in charge of the law-making procedure. And then his youngest brother became, the Vietnamese ambassador in a bunch of countries in Europe and the USA too. So yeah, he didn't have a wife, he didn't have a children, and the other person that you should know about is this: the wife of his older brother, Trần Lệ Xuân. He is a Vietnamese Margaret Thatcher. She is a Vietnamese Margaret Thatcher in a sense that she's actual evil. She is a monster. She was a monster. She came up with a lot of the fascistic laws that then, implemented by this fascist government. And she hated communists, and she was the one who literally like very happy with like the drug guillotine of the south of Vietnam. And she took, of course she's corrupted, she took a bunch of money and live like a happy life until the way she died, until the day she died. Trần Lệ Xuân, she's a monster. Margaret Thatcher of Vietnam, she's the first lady of Vietnam in that puppet regime. But she's the first lady, but she is not wife of the dictator. She's the wife of dictator's brother. Right. Oh, Conitius, here's my support to you and Vietnamese people. Peace and solidarity. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Conitius. Thank you so much. This means a lot to me. Yes, and yes. I need to make a video about this evil woman. She did a lot of horrible things. She literally she just got a handgun with her in her purse and just executed people on the street. And she's like very, she brag about it. It's not like something that like she was forced to do it. She just love doing it. All right, now. So in fascist Japan, those fascist Japanese, they believe in the superiority of Japanese people, and they wanted Japan to be a superpower in Asia, just like Italy and Germany wanted to become a superpower in Europe and conquer the rest of the world. Japan also believed in that, and they kill, other nationalities like Chinese or Koreans or Filipinos or Vietnamese. They didn't consider us human at all. They turned human into a tool for them. Is too fucking evil to say. Under this fascist regime in the south of Vietnam, the puppet regime, It was Catholic supremacy, extremely anti-communist Catholic supremacy. That he was so evil that he was cool by his own people. And now let's talk about this. The next kind of fascist regime was the Khmer Rouge. Let's talk about the Khmer Rouge now. Khmer Rouge is a very pretty unique kind of fascism in Asia, in general, and Southeast Asia in particular. But Pol Pot, his fascism, we need to learn a lot about his fascism, and most people don't know about this yet. Pol Pot started this as Mussolini. Pol Pot started as a communist. So Mussolini started as the anarcho-syndicalist, right? Who followed George Soros, the first fascist, the guy that had bad ideas that led to fascism, as our latest broadcast talk about. Benito Mussolini started as an anarcho-syndicalist. Pol Pot, the communist regime, started as a communist, quote-unquote communist. In the 1940s, when Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia were fighting against colonialism in Indochina, and Ho Chi Minh became very famous. Ho Chi Minh and Mao Zedong and Quezon Phomihan, the communist leader in Laos, they became very popular in this region. All right, Pol Pot took it as a chance, so he also called himself a communist. He also went to Paris to study, and then he was, in a connection with a bunch of communists in Paris too. He came back home. He came back to the country in the 40s, and he came back. No, he came back in the country in the 1950s. He also met his wife there in Paris, and his wife also called herself communist too. In the 1950s, he came back to Southeast Asia, and he used his connection, his reputation as some person studying in France, and so got introduced to Marxism, Leninism, and communism, just like Ho Chi Minh. He walked the same path as Ho Chi Minh. Went to Paris, met a bunch of communists, had connection there, and came back to the country and tried to liberate the country. He used that as, like a very good excuse to gain the trust from the Communist Party of Cambodia at that time. So he joined in the 1950s, came back from the French. He joined the Khmer People's Revolutionary Party. That's what they call him. The Khmer People's Revolutionary. So slowly, in the 1950s, he gained his influence. He gains influence from the Khmer People's Communist Party. He fooled people so much. He fooled people so much that he even met, he was so much that he slowly gained, higher and higher position in the Khmer People's Revolutionary Party, alongside with the Laos, Revolutionary Party and Vietnamese Communist Party. In 1960, I don't remember, 1961 or something, 1963, around the same time that Ngô Đình Diệm was assassinated. This Pol Pot guy, he assassinated To Samao, the leader of the Khmer People's Revolutionary Party. He assassinated him. On the paper, it just say like one day that guy To Samao he disappeared. He just disappeared. Nobody could find his dead body at all. He just disappeared. And right after that, Pol Pot took power, took his chair. Now, what kind of coincidence is this? Obviously, this guy, Pol Pot guy, assassinated To Samao and took his chair. And he tried to fool Vietnam and Laos so successfully in it that like he had even had a talk. He had a meeting to, with Ho Chi Minh and Khe Sanh from behind. So let me show you the picture. And this picture been misused a lot by anti-communists all over the world, saying like, oh, Vietnam actually somehow support you know the communist regime or something like that. And yeah, I will tell you the truth. I tell you the truth about this. What does this mean? Right? That's Ho Chi Minh in the middle. And on the right side is Pol Pot, and the left side is Khe Sanh from behind, the leader, communist leader of Laos at that time. That he fooled people this much. But then, right after that, he showed his true face. He started the campaign against Vietnam, and slowly, he asked like Cambodia people to stop supporting Vietnam in the Vietnam War. And but it's like just slowly like that, and we Vietnamese like communists were like, what the fuck's going on? And we just stopped having any connection with Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, and I stopped having the connection with them, and also allowed to they cut the tie, quietly cut the tie, and focusing on our own resistance war against the USA, late 1960 until 1975. Now, in 1975, where Vietnam won against the Vietnam War, and we had independence the same time as Laos and Cambodia, Pol Pot took power in 1975. I had a whole video talking about it. If you want to learn more, better go watch it. Took power, and in the matter of 4 years, from 1975 to 1979, he killed 26% of his own people. From 25 to 26% of his own people. Not counted other ethnic minorities too. This is one. The actual number is bigger than that. Right? He was supported by both Jimmy Carter of the USA and Deng Xiaoping of China. This is a very messed up part of history that we as a communist citizens, we need to be able to look at this time and learn lesson from it. It is very complicated. Why did the US and China both supported this genocidal regime? And I explained in my video very in detail too. Long story short, because of the Sino-Soviet split, at that time in 1969, there was a big skirmish between the USSR and China, and Vietnam joined the USSR side. And we learned a huge lesson from it. Because we joined the USSR side, it pissed off both the USA and China under Deng Xiaoping. And in order to weaken the USSR bloc, they backed Pol Pot. They didn't care that he was a genocidal maniac. He backed Pol Pot so he can sabotage Southeast Asia to weaken Vietnam, to weaken the USSR. That's all that they care about. That was why Jimmy Carter and Deng Xiaoping shook hands together to support Pol Pot and to sanction Vietnam all the way until early 2000, and took Pol Pot, the communists, as an excuse. All right? Vietnam at that time was the only one country on earth that dared to stand up and end the genocidal regime of the Khmer Rouge, despite the whole entire United Nations was against it. Even the Democratic Cambodia, the name of the Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge regime, the Democratic Cambodia, they had representative in the United Nations, and they accused Vietnam of invading Cambodia. And that is the same kind of argument still exists to this day, that Vietnam invaded a sovereign country of Democratic Cambodia, and blah blah blah, that like Vietnam imperialist. Like it's very painful for me to have to explain to people, and because it needs a lot of time and effort to educate people about that. They don't know that, or they know but they just confidently forget about that. What we ended was a genocidal regime, one of the most brutal regimes in human history, that killed 26% of its own people, and was usually compared to the Holocaust committed by the Nazi Germany. We were the only one who ended their existence. Meanwhile, they were backed by the USA, backed by China, and backed by the whole United Nations. And the whole United Nations, as the backyard of the USA at that time, took that as an excuse to sanction Vietnam comprehensively from 1970s, 80s, 90s, all the way until early 2000. Vietnam was living under comprehensive US sanction until all the way into early 2000, and I was born under the US sanctions. What did Pol Pot believe? Pol Pot's fascism was somehow very different but very similar to what we've been knowing about fascism. In 1975, right with the same year that he took power, he created something called the year zero. Mean that it's the year where everything starts from zero, from nothing. He was extremely anti-intellectual. He now again, let's talk about the Michael Brandy's definition of fascism. How much the communist fascism match this definition? First, it's a pseudo-revolutionary. All right. The reason why Pol Pot and the communists had power was because they disguised as communists who wanted to liberate Cambodia from imperialism and capitalism, wanted to bring back the wealth to the Cambodia people and get it out of the hands of imperialism and the bombs of the USA. Absolutely pseudo revolutionary here, and it is irrational past appears to the working class. Yes, because in order to gain the support of Cambodia people, especially the working class Cambodia people, at first, communists, the Pol Pot claimed that they want to liberate Cambodia from the imperialism, and then later that in the late 60s, he changed his argument into like they wanted to liberate Vietnam, Cambodia from Vietnamese rule, because Vietnamese was the biggest threat to the superiority of Vietnam, of Cambodia. It was like, what? And then until all the way 1975, he started his own idea that he wanted to bring back the Angkor Empire in the 12th and 13th century, and he fabricated a whole entire history of the Angkor Empire about why it collapsed and blamed everything on Vietnamese people. Blame every single thing on Vietnamese people and about the collapse of the Angkor Empire. You want to bring it back. Fake history, just like the Nazi Germany. So they created a totally false history of the swastika, because at that time they found like there's a swastika symbol in Choi, what they call Choi. They only believe Choi at that time. Choi. There's a swastika there, and around that time they also found swastika symbol in Germany at the time. So somehow they connect that two dots together, and they fabricated a whole history of so there was an Aryan empire that was extremely powerful that controlled Troy from all the way from Germany to Troy. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what they did. Same here. Pol Pot created a whole fake history of Vietnam destroying the Angkor. The whole history of Vietnam Angkor empire. Vietnam destroyed the Angkor Empire, and now Vietnam is the biggest enemy to Khmer people. And in order to bring back the greatness of the Angkor Empire, we need to destroy Vietnam. Like, what? Yeah, I said something like that. It's Yes, it's irrational, right? And it served the ruling class. But part of it is serving the ruling class. Oh, because they serve the actual ruling class of the Khmer Rouge, the people who were in charge of the Khmer Rouge. They were so rich, man. Millions and billions of dollars in food and weapon were sent to them by the USA, by China and the United Nations, and most of them fell into the hands of the Khmer Rouge leaders. It's like that. Yeah. And they created, you know, the glorification of the nation state. Like the Japan, the they glorify, the emperor and the nation of Japan. The Shinto became the official religion of Japan, and they worship the king, and they kind of, they treated the king, they claimed the emperor of Japan to be to be some kind of divine kind of image. At the same time as um, Ngô Đình Diệm, the fascist dictator of Vietnam, they wanted to bring, to turn Christianity into, like the main national religion, where he was like the supreme leader. People have to love him, blah blah blah. About Pol Pot, this is a little bit different. A little bit different. So in Japan or in Vietnam, the fascists, they took an already existing religion to be the national religion, and people need to worship them as God. But with the Khmer Rouge, he did it in a different way. It's the same kind of course. So Pol Pot, he wanted to eliminate all kinds of religion. There was no Christianity, no Buddhism, no Hinduism, no Islam whatsoever. No Taoism, no religion whatsoever. So he became the only one leader. Everything has to follow his the needs and his wills. He erased all kind of religion and wanted to become the only one existent religion in Cambodia. All right, now I'll talk a lot about the five criteria of fascism according to the Michael Parenti's definition of fascism. There's another part that I haven't talked about yet. It's like they are beside that three main points of a definition of fascism. Fascism also has five characteristics. All right, now this is the thing, like the five characteristics of fascism is this, and you have to understand this. It's not exactly the same all the time. It's just like fascism tend to have this five characteristics. This is for you to understand better and clearer about what fascism actually do, right? First characteristic of fascism is a glorification of the leadership cult. Glorification of the leadership cult. Fascism is a cult where they worship one leader. It was Benito Mussolini in Italy. It was Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. It was Hirohito in fascist Japan. It was Ngô Đình Diệm in the fascist puppet regime in the south of Vietnam. It was Pol Pot in the Khmer Rouge, the genocidal regime of the Khmer Rouge. They always treated those as, one nation, one state, one funeral, something like that, right? Like something it could be wrong, but like that's the slogan of Adolf Hitler. They always equate the image of one single supreme leader with the image of the country and with the image of the whole nation state, like that, equate like that. So the glorification of the leadership cult. Fascism is a cult where they all worship one single being. Second, glorification of the nation state as an end in itself. Yes, fascism, no matter how much they claim themselves to be communists, they are never communists because inherently communists are internationalists. Keep in mind this. We are communists, we are internationalists in a sense that we fight for a stateless, classless, and moneyless society. We fight for a world without any borders. All right, so the nation state is never the end goal of communism. No, like Vietnam for now, Cuba for now, we have a borders because we are still actively fighting against imperialism and capitalism, and having borders is a way for us to defend ourselves from the attack coming from the outside world. But eventually we want to eliminate borders. We want to fight for a stateless and classless society. But those fascists, the nation state is their end goal. The nation state is what they fight for. A state that owned by the fascists, extremely strong and powerful government controlled by one single person. That's the end goal. Meanwhile, two communist actual socialists having a border and having a revolution start the government of the people, the workers government is just like step one. Next, we eliminate the state, the borders. All right. The third characteristic of fascism is that militarism and jingoism. Now this is very clear. Militarism and jingoism, they all fantasize and glorify their military. Benito Mussolini absolutely ruled by a literal military strong army. Adolf Hitler, obviously, yes. Japan, oh yes, they are so military. They are so militaristic. People call themselves militarists. How strong and powerful their military is. And beside the Hirohito, the emperor of Japan, Tojo, the prime minister, also the great general, the general of Japan at the time that led the whole army of Japan that go and conquer other country. Ngô Đình Diệm also specialized, like they glorified a lot about military. That was like work with the U.S. troops and form his own army. And literally, he was called by his own military personnel. They were so powerful under his time that they called him. All right, Pol Pot, absolutely yes. The whole entire, like the communist soldiers, they literally like kidnap and force like children into the concentration camp and train them to be leader soldiers for the communists. It's all about soldiers. And jingoism, absolutely, they believe that they are superior, just like Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. They believe that they're superior to Jewish people. Japanese fascists, they believe that the superiority of Japanese people over, Chinese people or Vietnamese people, in Filipino people too. And Ngô is a little bit different because he's like a fascist Christian. So he believed in the superiority of Christian people over other religious people. Superiority of that. Pol Pot, absolutely, he's like Khmer supremacist, and he wanted to end the existence of Vietnamese people and all kind of other ethnic minorities. The fourth is folk mysticism, racism, xenophobia. I don't think I have to explain more about this. How racist, how xenophobic, and how like mystic these divine leaders trying to impose on their own country. Mystic about Adolf Hitler, about how the Aryan race better. How the Japanese people is better, how Ngô Đình Diệm, how Christianity is much better than other religion, and they hated China too. Oh man, Ngô Đình Diệm, they hated China, hate so much that they used China. One of the main argument of them fighting against Vietnamese communists was that like, they claimed that Vietnamese communists were the puppet of China. And since they hate China so much, they should support Ngô Đình Diệm against the communist Vietnam because they want to fight against China. It's extremely xenophobic here. So Pol Pot same thing, racist against Vietnamese and other minorities too. And the last characteristics of fascism is opposition to egalitarian working class movements. Even though they claim to want to protect the working class, they claim to build a workers' state system or something like that. They claim say that they want to protect the people, the working class people, and to bring wealth to the people. But actually, what they did was to terrorize people. Like in Pol Pot, he literally killed 26% of his own people, most of them the working poor and peasants. 26% of his own population. Ngô Đình Diệm dragged the guillotine over the South Vietnam and behead anyone that he suspected to be communist. They also oppressed Buddhist people, and most of the Buddhists are working class people. They didn't give a shit about working class people. Adolf Hitler also Jewish people, many of them are workers, and also they terrorize the heck out of their own country, and they oppress all Benito Mussolini too, oppress all of the worker rising in their own countries, and they like lower the minimum wage, lower the working conditions of the workers, and anybody who dare to rise up and fight against them, they were slaughtered. So there you go. These are characteristics. These are the phenomena of fascism. Now let's be clear. If you read the book that I translated about dialectical materialism, there's a pair of categories that you need to be fully understand. Is that it is essence and phenomena. All right. Essence is the inherent internal relationship inside within a thing and phenomenon, an idea that define that thing as itself. And phenomena is how it appears to human eyes and human sensation. Got it? Essence is the internal relationship that define a thing as itself. Without that essence, that thing is not itself anymore. And phenomena is just how that thing appears to human sensation. So when I talk about, the three main points in the definition of fascism, that is the essence of fascism. Every fascism has three main points. Without one of the three, is something close but not yet fascism. Understand it? According to Michael Parenti, it is the pseudo-revolutionary. It is the rational serving the capitalist class, and is irrational appealing to the working class. The essence of fascism, it must have. Every single fascism ideology has these three essence points. About the 5 characteristics that I just sent you, is that's how fascism appear to us, to our sensation, how from those characteristics we can learn about fascism. I say this again, the phenomena of fascism is first, the glorification of the leadership cult. Fascism is a leadership cult. Glorification, the second is the glorification of the nation state as an end in itself. I studied it so much. A lot of people say like communists are red fast, but no, they don't even understand what communist means. Communism means a stateless, classless society where we fight for a stateless, classless society. There's no state, no leadership whatsoever. But fascism, all they fight for is a super strong and powerful state that control every single aspect of a social life. That's their end goal. The third characteristic is militarism and jingoism. They glorify the military. They paid a lot of money and effort in building a super strong and genocidal military where they can go and kill people for the ruling class. And jingoism, in the sense that they believe in their own race superiority, their own people's superiority over other people, enough that it's justifiable for them to go kill, massacre, genocide, and rule over other people because they are superior. The fourth characteristic is a folk mysticism, racism, and xenophobia. Those fascists, they fabricated myths, fake histories to justify their jingoism, justify their superiority. And they use racism, sexism, and xenophobia to raise the hatred within their own people so they can go and kill for them. It's all to serve the military and jingoism. They fabricate folks, myth, racism, and xenophobia. And the last characteristic of fascism is that the opposition to the working class movement. Whenever we try to rise up to end existence, they will just slaughter us mercilessly. All right, mercilessly. Mussolini lied. Yes, Mussolini was never a leftist. Was never even anarchist or a communist or socialist. He was an opportunist who wanted to use again the pseudo-revolutionary call to fool people into supporting him because at that time communism was very powerful in Europe and Italy. Banning trade unions, yes, and banning all kind of like the workers' party, yes. Sukarno was also a fascist dictator in Indonesia. Sukarno, right? Is that Sukarno? I was always way confused between the two. Sukarno or Suharto? Oh my gosh. People correct me I'm wrong. Is Sukarno or Suharto? My brain is so melt. Suharto. Oh my gosh. Yes, Yes. I'm sorry. With my brain is totally melted with this fascist the BS. Yes, Suharto was the dictator of Indonesia. After Sukarno was a communist leader of Indonesia, that he had a really strong worker movement, and he led the biggest communist party in Asia, in Southeast Asia at that time, the biggest. And then he was totally destroyed. His movement, his government, totally destroyed by the USA, and they put Suharto dictatorship, a dictator in Indonesia, and what he did was to massacre 1.5 million Indonesian in a matter of few years. Names are similar, don't worry. Yes, I'm sorry. You get them mixed up too. Yes, Sukarno and Suharto, come on. All right. Jakarta Method. Yes, I cannot again recommend this book enough for you. Go read Jakarta Method. The author of that book is not even communist. He's just a liberal. All right. But then that book will open the eye a lot about how the CIA, how Washington use, their power, their tool to kill a whole entire movement of the working class in Indonesia and slaughter them 1.5 million people died during that anti-communist massacre. All right. And if you can go, you can. A long time ago, I watched a documentary on YouTube. You can go Google search. I don't know exactly the name, but it's a documentary of people who, go and interview those people who used to work for the Suharto dictator, and how what did they do and how did they feel when they like go massacre on people like that. And those people, they were total maniac, they were total psycho, in the sense that those people, they talk about their crimes against humanity with total like a normal thing. It's just like it felt like it's just like, oh, this morning I had this for breakfast. It's just normal to them like that. They nuts. They're not human beings. They're not human beings anymore. I mean, even in the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is also a kind of religious fascism, in a sense that, all right, I feel like we don't talk enough about this, especially in the West, because it doesn't serve the Western hegemony in learning about the Dalai Lama and then about religious fascism in Mongolia. Dalai Lama was a monk system, like caste system, almost like caste system in Indonesia. In a caste system in India. I'm sorry, caste system in India. Those Dalai Lama people, I here's the thing. It's so complicated. Tibetan Buddhism was a horrific regime. 98% of population was serfs. Yes. And since it related to religion, is a very quite a sensitive topic to talk about. But we need to look at this and learn about this and how the US is supporting this. Remember the video about the Dalai Lama a while ago, and how the Western media outlet immediately push it down, and how the Western media outlet like kind of to praise that new Dalai Lama. It's wow. It's fucked up. So yeah, this is the thing that most people don't know about it, because the Western media outlet do not talk about this, because they are using, here's the thing too, they are using religious fascism in Mongolia as an argument to fight against China. So I mean, so in the 80s and in the 90s, the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, when China trying to liberate Tibetan people from this fascist religious regime, and that was used against. I'm trying to be neutral here. I'm trying to state you the fact that was like used by the Western media outlet a lot for decades, even until this day, as China trying to suppress religion, and there's no freedom of religion under Vietnam. It's exactly the same as even to this day. If you go to the Human Rights Watch, go to the page about Vietnam, the main page about Vietnam on Human Rights Watch website, they still tell you that there is no freedom of religion in Vietnam. Okay, even though in fact that the real regime that didn't have freedom of religion was a puppet regime backed by the USA in the south of Vietnam in the 50s and the 60s. They never talk about that. They never talk about how that dictator Ngô Đình Diệm murdered and massacred and oppressed Buddhism in the south of Vietnam and forced Christianity to become the one legal religion in the south. No, and meanwhile, we Vietnamese people, we never did it, the Communist Party of Vietnam, the government of Vietnam now, they never did try to oppress any other religion, but they still use that as an excuse. And when China, they wanted to end this religious fascism in Tibet, that was used by the Western media outlet, and then because they want to serve that purpose of blaming China of not having freedom of religion, they never talk about how evil and how horrible that religious regime was, even is to this day, and how it fooled people and how it like tricked people. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. So what I can tell you, what I basically know about that religious regime in Tibet was that they had a caste system when the monks control the whole society, and as a person said, over 90%, nearly 100%, over the 90% of the society population serves, that they work, and all their purpose of their existence is to work and serve the monks and the Buddhist system over there. And so they believe that the Dalai Lama, they will incarnate into, after, if this Dalai Lama die, his soul will not go into like the next life or something. He would incarnate into some other boys or something like that. And so like when like those monks, they would go around the country and they literally kidnap the boys from their families. They kidnap boys from their families and bring those boys to their palace to train the boys there, and hopefully one of them will one day become the incarnated Dalai Lama. And it is a sensitive issue, but we need to talk about this more. We need to talk about this because we need to open our fucking eyes about this. And it is a thing, like a lot, there's true story that a lot of families, like they didn't want to, of course they want to live with their son, the children, right? But then like when the monks go and took their children away, they couldn't do anything because they were taught, they were brainwashed into us, and like they believe that their boys would have a better life living with the monks. All right, they took the boys away from family from very early age, like 6-9 years old, something like that, around under 10 years old. Took the boys away from families, and then told me that that my boys would be like a better life, blah blah. But actually, like, who the heck know what would happen to those boys? I don't know. And also believe that the Dalai Lama will incarnate into one of those boys. Is like, I don't think so. I don't think so. But again, it's pretty creepy. I mean, in the sense that, in a way, like the society where you worship a caste system like that, you worship the monks like that, and the monks has absolute power over the people. Even if you don't know nothing about that, how horrible it was, at least you should feel like something is off about this, right? About the monks would take whatever the kids they want, and people cannot fight against that. And all at the same time, like the monks have absolute power over society. It's very strange like that. So, yep. And yes, and of course, though, I don't know, the Human Rights Watch has any report about the atrocities in Tibet yet, but I can tell you a fact that when the Dalai Lama video got viral, and the West didn't talk about it at all. That's a matter of few days, all the videos like got like seriously like suppressed by the algorithm, and nobody talk about those videos anymore, and none of the Western media outlet pick up on that video. All they did after that, after a matter of few days, that they said like how much people love the Dalai Lama, and how Dalai Lama is so awesome, and how much the Dalai Lama did for the country, and the wisdom quotes from the Dalai Lama. I cringe so hard. I really cringe on nobody care about that video. Nobody talk about the history of that system, of the Dalai Lama, of that caste system in Tibet. All talk about is how people love the Dalai Lama, how Dalai Lama was so wise, the wisdom quote from Dalai Lama, and how Dalai Lama had a meeting with this figureheads of other countries. Like it's just that. It's like clearly they are controlling the narrative right here. All right, so I have around. I was late today, so I have about 10 minutes before I end the stream. You have any question? Free to tell me. Please feel free to ask me. I'm checking the chat right now. You can email me your questions. Let me show you my email. You can send me through where lunar.channel@gmail.com. Here, here, here. lunar.channel@gmail.com. So I will try to answer it as soon as possible. How much wealth does the Dalai Lama himself control? How rich is a king? I don't know. Nobody knows. Even the king is himself doesn't even know how rich he is. Zuri is asking about how many of Japan fascists and collaborators were kept alive. A lot. About the Japan kind of situation, the fascism was never ended in Japan. Like they were never ousted. No, they just write a new a constitution and that's it. The same fascist leaders after 1975 and 1947 remain the same. The government still remain the same. The army still remains the same. Even so much the same, the army of Japan at that time, the Navy of Japan now, they still use the same rising sun of the fascist flag. I mean, just remain the same. They are the same. All right, and it's just never end. It just change the name. They just change the name. What about the fascist dictator in Vietnam were totally ousted? Yes, because the communists won. We completely eliminated them out of the government, but not in Japan. In the communists right now, so the communist is a little bit more complicated than that. The prime minister of Cambodia right now, Hun Sen, he used to be a soldier of the communists. When he was 25, he became a soldier fighting the communists. And for a few years serving the communists, he saw the brutality of the genocidal regime of the communists. And that was why him with 4 other people crossed the jungle in the south of Vietnam, went to Vietnam and asked for the help of Vietnam. So, and after we defeated the Pol Pot and ended the existence of the communist regime, the people voted for him as a leader, the prime minister of Cambodia. Even though even to this day they still have a royal family, but it's just like mostly image. But yes, I'm still fucking disappointed they still have the fucking king family. All right, so he became the Hun Sen, the former communist soldier who deserted and arose against communists, now become the prime minister of Cambodia. But there are still a lot of like the descendants of communists in Cambodia even to this day. and they talk mostly they join different parties, the opposing parties, and they're very anti-Vietnam. And it's they every nearly in every single election they run, and they trying to put that Hun Sen, the prime minister, down off his chair so they can take power and become, back to like, the anti-Vietnam kind of government, something like that. Hi, Luna. What is Vietnamese perspective on expat communities in Vietnam? Do people worry about importing fascism? On one hand, we don't like them. In a sense, like we don't equate all of you like the same, but we do not like, we actually really hate very much expats, quote unquote. I hate the word expats. They're immigrants. All right, expats is like white immigrant bullshit. We hate those people who came to Vietnam, benefit from our socialism, our hospitality, and uh, our friendship, but then they are racist against our people. They do not respect our culture. They don't even bother to learn our language. Either we don't ask for much. We don't ask for much. We just say hello and thank you and count in Vietnamese, and we very much appreciate that. But like those people, they are absolutely racist against our people, and they treat our people as the subject. We fucking hate those people. All right, and we want those people to be get the fuck out of our country. All right. On the other hand, we do not equate all of you like that. We are not racist against white people. it Not like you. A lot of you like racist against all non-white people, but like we are not racist against white people. It's just like we know that they are shitty, many shitty of you, but like not all of you. And if you just show like a little bit of respect our culture and our people, learn a bit of our culture, our language, and this is just that. It's not much to ask, right? And we are not worried about them importing fascism. We pretty much not, because we know that we are very strong, we're tough, and they won't be able to do anything against it. It's just like annoying seeing those racists around here, but we know for a fact that they won't have much influence in our society, because we know better than that, and we fought against the whole entire war. So like a few immigrants won't make any change. No, but like yeah, we still hate them. Kind of annoying, those racist immigrants. I mean, I can like the group in on um Facebook, we call the Hanoi's expat groups. The worst. They're the worst. If you want to go, and if you want to go and see how racist and assholes those people are, go to Facebook and search Hanoi expat group. Absolutely worst. Ugh. Exactly. Many of those people back, I know a lot of okay, let's say Mike Tatarsky, a very famous guy that we talk about him a lot because I hate him so freaking much. Mike Tatarsky is a white guy, been living in Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City for a long time. He is the chief executive editor for a magazine called Saigoneer. And he's absolutely racist and anti-communist and ignorant white supremacist. He's been living in Vietnam, making money out of our own people, and talk shit about our own country. So he was the one who like literally chief editor of a whole English-speaking magazine based in Vietnam, and he was a journalist who freely write a newspaper and go on the Twitter and Facebook, and he was the one who wrote that there is no freedom of press in Vietnam. Yeah, if there is no fucking freedom of press in Vietnam, he's already ousted. All right, literally the people who claim that there is no freedom of press in Vietnam are the people who literally work for an English newspaper or own one. Does even speak Vietnamese? Not a single word. No. And why I know about this is, long story short, one day he posted a letter from the government of Vietnam to inform that the government will have a campaign that they would go and because like there was a problem of stray dogs and cats in Ho Chi Minh City where he lives. Stray dog and cats are like like go and like they can carry rabies and they can attack human. Human can have a rabies over that, and they just have a campaign of volunteers who go like take those stray dogs and cats to a center so to protect the community in that area, and this does it. But because he didn't speak even a single word of Vietnamese and he didn't even bother to ask other Vietnamese to translate of him, he used Google Lens to translate that letter, and it happened in that letter that we use a Vietnamese word. It means a campaign, but in Vietnamese we use the word gia quân. Một chiến dịch ra quân. Ra quân just means they launch a campaign to do something. But then because of the fucked up between the Google translation, it's not perfect, right? So the Google translate into a military operation. So that Mike Tatarsky guy, the chief editor of the Saigonia Whole magazine, talking about Vietnam in English. He's like, holy shit. He typed it on Twitter. Holy shit. Vietnam used a whole entire military operation to deal with stray dog and cats, according to Google Translate. Wow. What he wants to imply is that, Vietnam is so authoritarian, evil, dangerous, and stupid at the same time. The weak, strong enemy coming from fascist argument. Vietnam is authoritarian, evil, dangerous, and stupid at the same time because we use a whole military operation to deal with stray dog and cats. They laugh so hard, you see the amount of racism in this kind of thing. The amount of racism, these people, this is not, look at this, they so ding dong, and they do this, it's stray dog and cats. And he did it very insidiously. That he added one single sentence, like a small blank. It's like according to Google Translate. So what if we kind of blame something on him or explain the situation? It's like, it's not my fault, it's a Google Translate's fault, not my fault. The translate this, I don't know. So the plausible deniability here. He's a fucking chief editor of a whole entire magazine. His English is perfect. He can't even. He doesn't have any Vietnamese staff who translate that letter to him. He has to use the fucking Google translation. All right. It is so. It's dehumanization. Exactly. Mike fucking Tatarsky. Michael Tatarsky. You go to Google, search him. This is there, right there. Fucking asshole like that. And yes, it was one of the more story of the people that we really fucking hate. And own a fucking newspaper, freely to talk on social media, benefit from our society, how great and awesome and affordable it is, and their whole career, they made a whole career of talking shit and lying about us. Imagine a Vietnamese person trying to move to the US and become a journalist without speaking a word of English, and imagine getting a higher salary than the average American. Imagine. That's exactly what happened here. All right. I think we are over time. I've been having fun. I can't see anything. Oh, there's Mark Lupin. Thank you so much for the donation. Yay! It was 30 minutes ago. I hope that you're still here. Mark Lupin, thank you so much. Okay. All right, that's it for now. I am very hungry. And I smell the food that my mom is cooking, which is awesome, which is rare that my mom is cooking food. Usually I cook. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you so much for all of your super chats and your donations. It helps a lot. And see you next week. Bye.